In this video, we're talking about how Sony is making awesome new changes to their beta program. You're going to want to join. Then we're going to talk about why the PS2 is back in the news. Finally, we're going to talk about the free PS Plus problem that's kind of cropped up for Sony. How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is PSReady, my channel all about PlayStation, and there is a lot of news to cover. I go away on a trip, I take 4 days off for the first time since September, and then all this news comes out, so I'm excited to talk about it. I'm just going to roll right into this first news story because it's really interesting, because Sony is making huge changes to their beta program. Traditionally, how this works is once you sign up and you're in the beta program with your PSN ID, if they ever do a console beta for the PlayStation 5, you'll get emailed a voucher key that you punch into the PlayStation Store and your PlayStation 5 will update. And mostly, well, entirely, it's been limited to the actual console, but they put out a PlayStation blog post that let us know they have a big new beta program that includes much more than just software updates. The first thing it asks is your preferred type of game. So like shooter, action, RPG, any of that stuff. Then it gets even more granular than that and asks what you like to do in games. So I checked Explore, I checked Explore, I checked Combat, I checked PvP, just like the top 3 things I like to do in a game. Then it asks what platforms you have, whether it's PS5 or PC, and then at the very end, it tells you what exactly you're signing up for. It's extending the beta program from system software, so new features for the PlayStation 5, to actually getting to play games early and test them out and give direct feedback to Sony, which is awesome because it shows that they're actually listening to us. There's a couple other things that kind of let me know that they are listening to fans more that I'll talk about in a sec, but I think it's really interesting to see Sony, who's been criticized left and right by me, by a lot of fans in the community, by people on X and everywhere else for not talking to us, right? Like they used to talk to us all the time. The PlayStation blog was getting posts left and right, new game announcements, new software announcements. They were directly asking fans in their email what type of games they want to see Sony making. And then after the big E3 show in 2019, that was a huge disaster because they trucked people around to different tents and everything and made a bunch of pomp and circumstance out of like just showing off games. They just turned the spigot off entirely. They said, we're not talking to our fans anymore. We're going to go back, make games they want to make. We know what they want. We're not going to listen to them. And it looks like that is changing, which is good because that's been my biggest point of criticism outside of the fact that we haven't seen a lot of first party games. I don't like how hard people go on them for the first party games thing because a lot of it was due to trying new things, right? Like live service isn't the best. I'm not a huge live service fan. I used to be way more into it than I am now, but like I'm always gonna support Sony or other publishers kind of going out of their way to break out of their comfort zone, because even if you make the best thing over and over again, people notice patterns and then they get sick of it. So like, you know, Sony makes open world third person action RPGs. That's all they were making for pretty much the entire PS3 and PS4 generation. They'd all come out and get 9s and 10s and everyone would love them, but you'd start to see the sales kind of creep down because even if the things are different, like, you know, Ghost of Tsushima takes place in Japan, but God of War Ragnarok takes place in fantasy mythology world, the core of the game is so similar that like you start to not really want to be there day one because you get a little bit exhausted, right? Like if it's 50-hour game after 50-hour game where you're checking off boxes, you're exploring the map, you're doing combat challenges and things like that, no matter how different the theme of the game is, the core gameplay remains so similar that you kind of get sick of it. So I like to see them trying new things because that's how new trends are found. No one had no idea how big Battle Royale games were going to explode. Then PUBG came out, changed the entire world of gaming. Then you got Warzone, then you got Apex Legends, and a billion other Battle Royales. Now, those aren't always the type of games that I'd prefer, but I like to see new trends catching on because innovation is good, and that's what's going to keep people coming into the gaming space. I think the big missing key there, though, is that they've been trying to do it themselves. Like, I understand that they are really good tastemakers. I understand that they're the game developers, but like, we're the ones spending money on the games. We kind of know what we want to see in games. So I think it's smart to go to the fans that are spending money on your console and your games and ask them directly what they want, and extending the beta program to not only include games, but be for anyone who wants to join completely for free. I really don't see how this could be spun in a negative way. And I looked around to see if the usual suspects were complaining about it, and no one was. So I think this is really cool. I think they could take the system software betas a little bit further, honestly, and start letting people test features a lot earlier. I talk about the Steam Deck pretty frequently on this channel just because I have Deck Ready, but the way Valve breaks out software updates on the Steam Deck is awesome. They have multiple beta channels. So like you can do the release channel, which is just stable software, which comes out, every couple of months or so. But when they're testing the next big update, you can join a beta channel or a preview channel. And then I think there's even one higher than that where you're getting the like most untested features, and it's totally up to you which one you join. But when you're in, you get access to features as fast as you want. And I'd like to see Sony do that. I understand why they might be a little bit skeptical or like nervous to do that, because I think the Steam Deck has a lot more of a niche audience than something like the PlayStation 5. Obviously, you wouldn't want some person who just buys NBA 2K every year or Call of Duty every year to accidentally stumble into getting some like unreleased beta update that breaks their console and they don't know how to fix it. But I think they could just add warnings and say, look, if you're in the preview beta, you're getting the most untested features, you're gonna see problems, and you just have to let us know so we can fix them, right? Like you can put warnings in place just like Valve does on the Steam Deck. And I think that's a good way to kind of make sure that they're prioritizing the features people want. I love the ones that come out of nowhere, like the Welcome Hub and everything like that, or 1440p support, because no one really expected it to happen. But I feel like we could have gotten those a lot sooner if they had just had an expanded beta program like the one that they currently have now. So overall, I think it's a great change and I like to see more of this. And also, I've noticed that Sony's doing a lot more outreach to creators lately and just talking to people in the field that talk about PlayStation and really enjoy the console. So if anyone from Sony is watching, I'm happy to give feedback. I'm happy to just gas you up because I've really been enjoying both my PlayStation 5 and my PlayStation 5 Pro. If you want to join it, it's really easy to find. Just search new PlayStation beta program and all you have to do is log in with your PlayStation Network ID, fill out that little survey, and then from that point forward, just check your email for emails from PlayStation, like Star PlayStation, so you get notifications every time you get an email, because it actually has happened to me a couple of times where they send out a beta key and I miss it because I wasn't checking my email, and then I see the beta's out, I search through my email, and then I'm like, oh, I actually got an email for this. So if you do sign up for this, make sure you check PlayStation so it doesn't go into your junk or anything like that, or at least you get a notification when you get a message from them, because who knows, you could be trying out the next big PlayStation game and not even know it. And that brings me to the second news story of today's video, which is that the PlayStation 2 is 25 years old. I literally recorded this little segment already and I was like, there's no way the PlayStation 2 can be 25. That seems like so old. That just knocked me on my ass, man. That is crazy. But yes, the PlayStation 2 came out on March 4th, 2000 in Japan, which is one day after my birthday, which is kind of interesting. And the PlayStation 2 has an interesting legacy specifically for Sony, because if you look back, it is the biggest and best-selling console ever made. A lot of people like to point at the fact that it was a DVD player that you could get relatively cheaply compared to a regular DVD player at the time. And even when the DVD player prices started to fall, having the added benefit of being able to play games on your DVD player is a good way to kind of get people in the door. But with the PS3, it was the same thing with a Blu-ray player. It was also a DVD player. Same goes for PS4 and PS5, but not the Pro unless you buy the disc drive attachment. So I don't really think it's that big of an enhancement when you can see how many amazing games came out during the PS2 generation, a lot of them exclusive to the PlayStation 2. So because of that, the PS2 is the best-selling console ever. It looked like it was going to get outpaced by the Nintendo Switch, but Sony kind of came out and did a little bit of a sly update and increased the sales from 155 million to 160, just to make sure that Nintendo never passes them with the Switch. Obviously, as well as the PS3 ended up doing, it didn't reach the heights of the PS2, mainly because of things like the recession and also the fact that it was way too expensive and had no games when it came out, but it did turn things around towards the end, and it looked like the PlayStation 4 was going to get to those PS2 numbers, and while it got close, it wasn't able to reach it. And now, because of the same situation with the PS3 generation, just a little less bad, the PS5, which had a meteoric launch couple of years where they were just selling every single one on the shelves, the second they became widely available and the game started to dry up, you saw those sales steadily decline. So it doesn't look like the PS5 is going to reach the heights of the PS2 either. I don't really want to buy into the criticism that it's the PS5's fault. Like, I understand that the availability was a big problem and also the lack of big first-party games is a problem, but the PS5 is a weird generation because of how long the PS4 generation has lasted. We just got updated numbers and it's still looking like 50% of PlayStation's monthly users are on PlayStation 4 still. Like, people are holding out and not upgrading, and I understand why, because there just hasn't really been anything that really demands the cost of a PlayStation 5. Like, the hardest core gamers, they're they're buying the PS5 day one, they're buying the PS5 Pro day one. But like, if you're the average person who plays Call of Duty, you see Call of Duty Black Ops 6 coming out on the PlayStation 4, you're going to just buy it on PlayStation 4, most likely, because you don't want to drop $500 on a brand new console. And it all kind of feeds into this whole new metric of engagement, where like they just want to have monthly active users in all places possible, whether it's PC, whether it's PS4, whether it's PlayStation 5, whether it's PlayStation Portal. They just want people gaming on the PlayStation Network, interacting with the PlayStation Store, or buying PlayStation games through Steam, because that's how they generate money, by keeping your attention. So when I think about the PS2 generation success, it comes down to a few key factors. The first one being the leaps and bounds in graphics and performance were just so much bigger back then. Like the jump from PS1 to PS2 is insane compared to the jump from even PS3 to PS4. And honestly, I don't know how to attribute fault to anyone for that, just because it seems like chips have gotten as good as they're going to get, because that's why we've started needing things like DLSS and FSR and all these upscalers and everything like that. Like there's been a real stagnation in how much more powerful chips can even be in the first place. So it's not really anyone's fault, I would say, that chip manufacturing has not improved as much as it did from the PS1 to PS2 or PS2 to PS3. There's also the cheap DVD player aspect. I don't want to downplay that too much, but when you really think about it, it all comes down to having amazing games. Like how many big PlayStation franchises really blew up on the PlayStation 2 era, and some of them are still around today. God of War started on PS2. You got God of War 1, you got God of War 2, that's still around today. Ratchet and Clank started in the PS2. There were tons of Ratchet and Clank games during that era, and Ratchet and Clank, while it's still not really reaching meteoric heights in terms of what PlayStation's selling with something like Spider-Man, it was still one of the cool launch titles that actually took advantage of the PlayStation 5 with the cool SSD tech and everything like that, and it's cool to see Insomniac still around. Sucker Punch got started with Sly, and while Sly isn't really around anymore, Sucker Punch has done a really good job just being an IP factory for Sony, going from Sly Cooper to Infamous to now Ghost of whatever character or location they want to use for that series going forward. So a lot of Sony's biggest companies that they own now, biggest developers, all started during the PS2 generation. And then you've also got companies like Naughty Dog, who now make things like Uncharted and The Last of Us, but back then made stuff like Jak and Daxter and Jak Racing and everything like that. But it feels like game development just kind of stopped at a certain point. Like they hit the metric that they wanted to, where they could sell a reliable number of games, and then they just made more games that were just like that, where it's third-person open world action adventure games, and no one's really trying anything new, and the industry is not conducive to that, because with how expensive games have gotten to make, it really doesn't incentivize risk in any way, right? Because, you know, you're spending hundreds of millions of dollars developing a game. You don't want to try anything that's out of the wheelhouse of what you know people are going to want, because if you screw up, your studio's gone. We're seeing a ton of layoffs at Sony right now in Visual Arts, which is the like support studio that works with Naughty Dog a lot. That's how The Last of Us Part 1 remaster was made. Like they just started working on it all by themselves, and then Naughty Dog kind of took it over the finish line. They did a good job with that, and it sold pretty well, but even that wasn't enough to keep those people around, and they were making the safest remake of all time. So when you have situations like that, you can kind of see why a lot of developers aren't really innovating outside of the indie space. Thankfully, we have companies like Hazelight doing stuff like Split Fiction, which looks like an awesome game. I haven't gotten a chance to try it yet, but it's just like those games come out once or twice a year instead of every 3 months like they did on the PS2. And I don't know if we'll ever get back to that, but looking back on the PS2, it just had so many things going right, obviously. Like the big jump in graphics from PS1 to PS2, the price was right, having the DVD player, and just a huge plethora of excellent games. And that brings me to the third news story of today's video, which is the PS Plus situation. So I can't believe this happened a month ago or even more, but the PSN went down for an entire weekend. We all complained about it because, you know, that's a really shitty situation that's happened multiple times over the past couple of years, and it doesn't seem like Sony's really doing anything to not only fix it, but also mitigate it. And when they brought it back up, they said, look guys, we're going to give you all 5 days of PlayStation Plus. That's more days than the PlayStation Network was out, so be thankful for it. And while, you know, I think they could have done a little bit more, as someone who lived through the great PS3 PSN outage way back in the day, where we got multiple free games when it came back, it is nice to see that they gave us a little bit more than the bare minimum. Like, it's not much more than the bare minimum, but it is a little bit more, so they deserve to be praised for that. So that was supposed to roll out over the weekend, and you actually have to go into your account settings on the PlayStation Store to make sure that you got granted the extra 5 days. It'll actually give you a little bit of a notification or something like that. But a lot of people were noticing that they actually didn't get their 5 days, but some people did and some people didn't. This is where Sony does need to improve communication. Like, a lot of this stuff just shows up on the Ask PlayStation PlayStation Twitter and they said we're working on getting it out. This stuff should be on the official PlayStation account, you know, the main one that people look for. Like, I look at the Ask PlayStation Twitter and it seems like it's fan run sometimes. Like, it doesn't feel like an official Sony account. I understand that they want the PlayStation's official account to be a marketing tool first and foremost, but like when your biggest fans like me are like, did I get my 5 days of PS Plus back or didn't I? That shows a lack of communication, because I should be the first and easiest one to know. But yeah, if you're one of the people who didn't spend like $800 or something on stacking up your digital gift cards to get more PS Plus time before they raise the price, and you're paying month to month like I am, you'll be happy to know that you got 5 extra days waiting for you the next time you turn on your PlayStation 5. Hopefully. It might take a little bit longer because we don't know. Anyway, guys, that's all I've got for you in today's video. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.